Ed Aguirre, assistant coach extraordinaire from the Academy of Holy Angels. I see you have a very full legal pad, but first, it's great to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you, Peter, and very excited for this opportunity.
Yeah, I would say it's been a long time, but I see you around the ring a fair amount. But you coached me, oh my God, how long ago? 2010? So that was 15 years ago. And the sad part is that I look older and you look younger.
That's just lucky.
That's just lucky. No, maybe it's good genetics on your part. And we are going to talk genetics today. We're going to talk a little bit about your upbringing on the west side of St. Paul, which I think is the most underappreciated part of the city. Shout out to. And as an assistant coach, you're underappreciated too. And we are recording on Cinco de Mayo.
Yep.
And you are of Latino heritage, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
An underappreciated holiday, an underappreciated part of the city, and an underappreciated coaching role.
It couldn't work out any better.
To use Jossie's term from earlier, we're going to gas you up today, Ed.
Oh, boy.
We're going to gas you up today.
This is going to be fun.
So let's go back to the beginning. For those who don't know, the west side of St. Paul is not really west of St. Paul. It is south of downtown. So Give us a little bit of a geography lesson about where the west side technically lies.
Well, it basically lies, people get the West St. Paul area a lot mixed up with the west side. So it's more, like you said, away from the river, heading south. And it's located just before Annapolis Street. For those that are familiar with the west side, kind of West St. Paul area a little bit, Annapolis is the cutoff. So below Annapolis is the west side, and above that is the West St. Paul area. So it's not a very extremely large area, but it has a lot of deep roots from many years. I mean, just for example, my father lived on the west side for 65 years, I believe.
65 years.
Yep.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of deep roots into the neighborhood, which is awesome. And there has been people that have moved off of there too, but there are a lot that stayed and remain. But I'm one that migrated out of the neighborhood too, but really enjoyed all my time living in that area, growing up with all my friends. 65
years. So what year did your parents buy their first house or move into their first property on the west side?
I guess they were on what was called the lower west side before I was born. And then it was probably, I believe it was around 1958 or 59, we moved up onto Morton Street. And parents bought a little house there, and then I was born in 1960. So basically, we started living in that house in about 1959, 58.
Okay, what did your parents do?
My father worked at the meatpacking plant, Armour and Company, down on Concord Street.
All right.
Along with several of the neighborhood kids. Fathers worked there. My mother worked at Peter's Wieners.
Okay.
That was, it's what it was. It was Peter's. But there was Peter's. They were famous for the wieners.
Where was it?
That was down on Robert Street, and the building is still there, and it turned into Captain Ken's Beans.
Captain Ken's Beans.
But my mother worked there for. My father worked at the Armour packing plant until it closed in 1979.
Okay,
Do you think they still have any merch?
From Peter's Wieners?
or the other one?
Or Armour and Company?
Armour and Company.
There's definitely merch from Armour and Company.
You can go to the state fair and get a Peter's Wiener.
That's what she said.
Jocelyn. I love that because I think South St. Paul gets too much credit for its meat packing.
Sure.
So back off, South St. Paul. And I think people forget how important meat packing was to that area. It's also right on the rail line. So back in the day, you worked at like two places. You'd work meat packing, or you'd be on the railroad as a conductor or as an attendant or what have you. And you said that most of the kids' parents, a lot of the dads worked at the meat packing plant?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I mean, several did, because there was also right next to Armour and Company was what was called Swift's.
Okay.
That was another large meat packing plant. You know, they were competitors, but they were right next to each other down on Concord, so it was just loaded with workers down there at that time. And I used to go to the plant with my father when I was little, and I remember kind of being a little horrified going in there as a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, you know, but I still remember it. And it was interesting, to say the least.
Were you horrified because now you saw where your burger patties came from? Or were you horrified thinking if, not to say like working in the meat packing job was pretty good. I mean, it came with benefits.
It's great paying jobs, yeah.
Good pay. But some parents use blue collar jobs to show their kids like, hey, do you want to do this for the rest of your life?
Yep.
So were you afraid of that? Did you ever fear working in the meat packing plant?
Not really. It was just kind of the blood scenes and, you know, just seeing all of, you know, they didn't waste a single part of like they said, the only thing we don't use on the pig is the squeal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, otherwise everything else, they find a function, and same thing with the cows and all of that. Yeah. So, but you just go, you'd see conveyors hauling heads all over, and there was just all this activity, you know, guts all over here on a table, and people are working with that. And so it was a little intimidating as a young kid. But
they say you don't really want to know how the sausage is made.
Yeah, probably.
Grind it up and call it a hot dog or something.
I would say that this was kind of an example of that. Yeah, exactly.
And I mentioned Cinco de Mayo a second ago, and I don't want that to come off as an insensitive joke, because the west side of St. Paul is primarily Latino. Yes. And it's been that way for at least 100 years. I was watching a PBS documentary the other day, and they were talking about Boca Chica going back, like the original owners of Boca Chica, which is the kind of the welcome to the west side. You get over that Robert Street Bridge.
Exactly.
And you go past Water Street, and there's some fancy lofts on the left side. You get past Plato, and there's a gas station. There's the Wabasha Street Caves, which is where a lot of out-of-towners, that's where their experience of St. Paul stops. The Wabasha Street Caves, and anything beyond that is the wilderness.
Yes.
But for me, you get past Wabasha, and all of a sudden Boca Chica opens up on one side, the taco house is on the other, District del Sol is the flag on the light post, and I think, oh shit, okay, now I'm in the right spot if I want to get a taco or a tostada or something.
Exactly. And it doesn't cover a lot of ground, but there's a lot going on within that ground.
There's so much energy and heritage packed into such a small geographic footprint.
Yes.
Growing up in that, did you feel like you looked around and everybody kind of looks like me?
Yeah. I mean, where to kind of put in relation where I live, that's the lower west side is where all of that activity is going on. I lived up the hill where I was up the hill a little bit, but obviously, we would hang around down there too with friends and things like that. But I mean, at that time growing up there, I mean, everybody was pretty much the same. Yeah.
Okay.
So
up and down the block, the names were probably similar to yours too. And did a lot of kids have the same kind of background? Like mom and dad started in a little spot, renting, and then they moved up and bought a house, and they made their lives
pretty much
on the west side.
Yep. Because actually, my mother grew up on the Swede Hollow. Now that's another old part of St. Paul.
There are ghosts in Swede Hollow.
Yeah, so she lived down there, and then my mother and father met in the Lower West Side and then moved up. Yeah, you're exactly right. A lot of them started out way down in the Lower West Side areas or in the Swede Hollow, and then they moved up.
They would move up the hill, and then they would move closer to the West St. Paul spot.
Yes.
Okay. Now. Who's the bigger celebrity on the west side? Is it Ken Yackel or Cesar Chavez?
Oh boy!
If they were both alive and in their primes and they ran for mayor,
I would have to go with Cesar Chavez.
By an inch though, right?
Yeah.
So Cesar Chavez Boulevard, right on Cesar Chavez, is the Ken Yackel Arena.
Yes.
Now, in 1973, you'd have been 13.
Yes.
You'd have been 13 years old. So when you were 13 years old, all of a sudden there's an arena. And in the early 70s, it was a big deal to have an enclosed arena with a roof and walls and glass and boards and bleachers. And I think some people look at those Ramsey County rinks, like I played at Biff Adams, and they scoff at them. There are no windows, and there are no vending machines.
They're cold.
There's no bubble hockey, and it's cold. But for kids in the early 70s, that was like paradise.
It was huge. And one thing a lot of people may not know, except around my age, is that they didn't start out with plexiglass. They started out with chain link fence.
Ow.
Yeah. And that was interesting. You found that, you get checked up against the fencing and cut, you could get some cuts if you were, and then have, the proper equipment big enough or whatever, you get some cuts and whatever. But one real funny story that I have to say is a game, it was a junior varsity game. I remember one time, and there was a teammate, he got checked. He was a shorter fella. He got checked, and he literally got kind of flipped upside down in a way. And back then, we didn't have the plastic covers on the skates, so you had that little piece hanging out in the back end of it. Well, as he got flipped up, that back piece of it caught onto the fencing, and he was hanging there. And the referees had to come over and get him down.
Little kids getting ragged all up against the chain link fence.
It was awesome. I don't remember how long before they got rid of the chain link and then they put in boards, because I think they started finding out that this wasn't going to work.
Some kid catches his cheek on the chain link, and all of a sudden there's blood and teeth all over the ice. Think, I might need to think of an alternative.
Yep.
Now, you can say no if you want to, but was that kid, the small kid who got flipped upside down, was it Frank Hernandez?
No, it was not Frank. No, Frank. Yeah.
Yeah, Frank joined your staff with the St. Paul Saints.
Yes.
For about a year, and I remember Frank.
Yeah, and just, there again, we coached together at Westside for, 8 to 10 years probably. So.
Okay. Where did kids on the Westside play before Ken Yackel?
Well, it would, I guess in that case it was, more of the playground. So then it would have been like Baker playground. Okay. And then, you would play the Palace playground under in the West End and, the different other playgrounds throughout that area. But a lot of it would have been, then Belvedere was another playground. And then Baker, I played more out of Baker as at that point. But that's where we played and skated outside all the time, games and practices, yep.
So did the different rec centers, did Belvedere have a team and Baker had a team and you guys would go at it?
Yeah, okay. Pretty much.
What were those rivalry games like?
Well,
I bet they were bloody.
They were fun. Let's just say that.
Knock some people over.
They were full of surprises a lot of times. You never knew. It depends upon what somebody, you get your lingo going on the ice and all that too. But anyways, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Back in when you were a youth player, how big was the association, if you had to guess?
Well, that's what's hard. I was thinking about that one because, at that age when I was going through that, quite honestly, I probably never really paid a lot of attention to any of that.
As a kid, you don't think about it.
And my parents, never were not really into the hockey at all, really either. So I kind of went off and ventured, and I'm not blaming them for that, but I went off and ventured with my friends and blazed my own trail. But so I don't remember a lot of. I know that obviously we had to have had some tryouts, and they probably ran very simplistic tryouts and split teams, A, B, C, whatever.
Okay.
And then we went after it. Yeah.
But it felt healthy to you. It felt like there were enough kids to field you can say you had an A, B, and C team, but if you have 10 kids on each team, then that's not really a full team.
They were smaller teams. Yeah.
Okay.
So
no complaints about ice time then?
No, never. Never.
Now, my athletic experience on the West Side, we would have the odd practice at Ken Yackel, but I also played soccer for St. Bernard's, and playing against Humboldt was always a big deal because Humboldt was really good. Did hockey and soccer compete for the same types of players, or did you guys have enough time to play both?
Well, at that time, I don't really, recall a lot of the soccer going way back then. The soccer got bigger later, from my time being at the high school and that. But really, there really wasn't really much competition at that point between those two for the hockey. So, which was great. So, I think that there was pretty healthy numbers. But once getting into the high school, but then it started to grow, go a little further ahead. But when another area merged with us at the high school, so
what was the other area?
The other area was Monroe High School.
Okay, so it was Monroe, and Humboldt absorbed Monroe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and then when I was in 1977, Monroe High School Senior High closed, and then we built a new high school was built for us on the west side.
Okay.
A new Humboldt. When I went to junior high, I was in the older building, which at that time housed the junior high and the senior high. But it was growing, kids were growing, it was the community was growing, so they had to build a bigger high school. And then Monroe closed, so then they brought all of those kids, because they didn't have a place to go, so they brought them over to us.
Okay.
And that obviously came with a little bit of anxiety, yes.
Little sharks and jets action.
A little bit, yeah, because now you had a whole new group of kids and students and athletes all competing for, all of the activities going on at Humboldt.
I suppose it would squeeze some kids out of varsity spots.
Yes.
Humboldt kids.
Yes, it happened. Yeah.
Okay. Was there any bad? You didn't get squeezed out of a varsity spot. No?
Well, I didn't play a lot my senior year. No, because I was not I wasn't the superstar hockey player, but I was a grinder. So I liked digging in the corners and doing those things.
Yeah.
More kids came over, and then there was probably some more skill sets that came over from the Monroe High School too. And then our hockey was growing too on that side. So, but I did get some playing time, but not a lot. No, so.
Okay, I do have a little bit of experience with Humboldt Junior High. So my parents, with myself and my two sisters, moved from Fargo to St. Paul. And I think they didn't do it on a whim, but they didn't know how anything worked, which is how I ended up playing hockey at Roseville and not Como, which would have been my home district. And my sister ended up going to junior high. We lived in Como Park, but she rode the city bus to Humboldt Junior High every day because my parents didn't really know how the school district things work, but they found her a place at Humboldt, and Humboldt said, yeah, absolutely, we've got a spot, and here's your curriculum. So I remember going to Humboldt Junior High and sitting through a band concert at Humboldt Junior. Sure. It felt like at one point, and this would have been 95, 96, that Humboldt Junior High had a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Does Humboldt Junior High still have kids?
Well,
there's a
lot of busing in from other neighborhoods. Yep. You go by there now after school, and you just see mega buses lined up. So that ended up happening because they wanted to keep the building full, as full as to capacity as possible. Yeah. Actually, they're even adding on to it a little bit.
Really?
I was over there a while back here, a year or two ago, and going to visit my brother. I go over there occasionally, and I noticed that they were building something on. I was rather surprised, but I don't know I never found out what it was, but so there still must be growing, I guess.
Well, that's good news.
Right.
Something is being built.
That's right.
Near Humboldt High School.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Humboldt, as a high school, Humboldt has kind of contracted. I think it's the smallest high school out of St. Paul's public high schools.
Yes.
Okay, I think it's around 800.
That's what I understood, yeah.
And I live across the street from the second smallest St. Paul Public High School. It's Como, which has got about 1,000 kids, and I think it's shrinking over the year. Humboldt High School during the 70s, and I do want to bring up the Facebook post that you made, because I thought it so perfectly encapsulated the West Side. And you were listening to a song in the car, and you said that it made you want to put on a silk shirt and Angel Flight slacks and go to Identity or Castle Royale. Yeah. And I would pay any amount of money to see Eddie Aguirre in his prime in a silk shirt, unbuttoned all the way down, you got your gold chain on right now. Yeah. So in the 70s at Humboldt High, was it all silk shirts and Angel Flight slacks?
Well, and the one piece of that I forgot was the platform shoes.
The platform shoes?
Yep.
How thick are we talking platforms here?
Right about that.
Right about here?
In the back. Yeah.
Push you to 6 feet.
And then in the front, about that.
Make you 6 feet tall?
Yep. We'd go downtown St. Paul to, I think it was Florsheim Shoes back then. And they had a nice array of platform shoes.
Oh, very nice.
So that added to the outfit. And the Angel Flight pants, that's the real name of the pants. They were polyester flared pants, yeah.
Well, I read that post and I was like, I got Angel Flight pants. What the hell is he talking about? I looked at him and I thought, oh shit, Ed is wearing Angel Flight pants. Incredible. So in high school, what was it like? Was it just a good time? Or is it a lot of kids that were thinking college after high school? Or was it more of a vocational technical atmosphere?
I would say the latter.
Okay.
There was, we definitely had some friends that, did the 4-year college thing.
Sure.
But I think the majority either, jumped into some trades or, like myself, I went to St. Paul TVI, as they called it back then, not St. Paul College, but So I went for a 2-year program for accounting.
Nice.
And, but I mean, a lot of the kids, there's a lot that I'm still in touch with several of, I still get together for lunches and things with some of my classmates. Matter of fact, I just had dinner the other night with a set of classmates that was a mix of the girls that came over from the West End and my buddies from the West Side. And even to this day, we're still together like that. So I don't know if you remember the song, was it the Pet Shop Boys, West End Girls?
West End Girl? I don't think I've ever heard it. You want to sing it for us?
No, I don't. You don't want to hear that. But we used to joke about that. But anyways, so there wasn't really a ton of the college thing, but
Okay.
I would say more of the vocational or going into some trades. And people just kind of, following maybe into their parents' footsteps a little bit with some of that. But yeah, lots of fun. I mean, we joke about, but, doing our dances we would have at school at that time, Saturday Night Live, Fever came out,
Okay.
I had a buddy that donned the white suit and the black shirt, and he was out there. He studied John Travolta, and he could do a lot of the moves. He was very good at it. But so yeah, we really had a lot of good times there. Yeah, I'll never forget a lot of the good things that went on.
Yeah.
My high school years.
And I only asked the college versus VOTEC question because in the 70s, St. Paul public high schools were kind of split. Like there would be a small portion of the population of students that were thinking 4-year schools, but there was a significant amount of kids that were like, I'm going to be a plumber. I'm doing HVAC. Or Mechanic Arts, I think, had a similar program, and that school closed down, I believe, in the 70s as well.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
But from some of the other people I've talked to, they've said, yeah, there was kind of a split in the student body where in the year 2025, I don't think that split really exists.
Yeah.
But the irony is that when the split did exist, the kids that were in the VOTEC programs, they'd be kicking our ass right now. I have a stupid-ass liberal arts degree in communications. What an idiot. I can't, my skills are going to be replaced by AI momentarily. Yeah. Do you take a little bit of pride in that? Out of curiosity as a blue-collar job that cannot be replaced by a robot?
Yeah. For me, my path, even though I said I went for the accounting, I never even really wound up in an accounting job, but I wound up in manufacturing.
Okay.
And I ended up working in the operations kind of side of manufacturing, large machinery manufacturing. So, I look at that as, it worked out great for me, but when I look back at it, and just as we're talking about the trades and everything like that, the one thing that I don't have, because now I'm embarking on retirement, so full retirement. So, Social Security is, it's going to take you so far. But I look at some other friends that I know, and, they maybe went more of the blue-collar type work or trades, and they have pension plans. I don't have a pension. So, so I had to do a lot of good saving, I guess, in saying that. What I'm just saying is that, I look back at that, and I kind of wish, that I would have been able to do that. I also wish I would have been able to have been at a company for, like I work with people that have been with the company for 50 years, that type of thing. Some of the plants I worked at closed down for various reasons, plant shutdowns, and I had to move a few times, but ended up with about 45 years in manufacturing. So, but it worked out well. Here I am, I raised my family and grandkids and the whole work. So that's what life's about. So,
are you nervous about retirement?
2 years ago, I did a semi-retirement thing, and I was kind of just done with it. And so I was out for about 2 years roughly. And the one thing that I found after a year of the honey-do list and everything else around the house and all of the things that I neglected because of hockey coaching 5 months out of the year and working, and obviously family. But after about a year, I found that I missed the interaction with people, and that was a big thing. My wife still works. We're exactly the same. We're 2 months apart. So, but I found that the interaction piece and not just seeing people every day and different conversations and things like that, I found that was kind of difficult, to be honest. I can keep busy. There's a lot of things I can keep doing. I golf and I do this and do that, but just knowing you're going to see some of your buddies from work every morning and joking and doing all those kind of things. So that's kind of my personality, is to be a jokester and have some fun conversations and things like that. So then I was able to go back to the same company. They started where they were hiring people that had semi-retired or whatever, bring them back for a couple of days a week to help out, because they were finding it was easier to bring those folks back rather than bringing somebody from out of the streets.
Yeah.
We could come in and we can do what we need to do and navigate. So I've actually been doing that for 2.5 years. And then on October, the big 65 comes. So that's when I'm going to pull the trigger full time. So.
Okay, all right, full-time retirement coming.
Yep.
May I just say you don't look 65?
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know what people, I've heard that, and I really appreciate the comments. I don't know how I got lucky with that. But, I mentioned earlier that I started running when my oldest son was born, and he just turned 41. So I got into the marathon thing a little bit in between there. I don't do that anymore, but casual running and walking, golfing, try to stay active.
I hear you.
So that's a little fear, is that, I'll probably pick that up more, but, the one thing you can't do is go dormant once you do fully retire. So.
Wow, you sound a lot like my mother, to be totally honest. The day she retired, she said, I'm retired, I'm done. She retired from St. Paul Public Schools after, I think, 25 years. And she sat around for about a week. And then she picked up a volunteer job at my old elementary school. She picked up a volunteer gig at my nieces and nephews' elementary school. And she started she gets out every day. She leaves every day, whether it's to do dinner for my sister and her kids, or to take somebody to an equestrian thing, or to dance class, or she's visiting a friend in St. Paul, or she's knocking on my door with 2 cups of coffee saying, I just thought I'd swing by. And I'm firmly convinced that keeps, she's 75, but it keeps her young. I mean, she's still with it. She has to be with it, because if she's going to go out into the world, the big bad world, she has to stay agile, mentally agile.
Very true.
We just went on a long diatribe about retirement. I love it, though.
Sorry.
I've always wanted to pick you. I've always wanted to pick your brain about things, because I've always respected you as a person. And I did do a little bit of background on you. I checked in with a source close to your current situation about what makes you such a wonderful coach and what makes you such a big part of the Holy Angels program. We'll get into that in a second. I don't want to flatter you too much.
No, I'm not good with that stuff. So,
who was your coach at Humboldt?
Ralph McDonough and Mike Sullivan. When I played JV, Mike Sullivan was the JV coach, and he was also our art teacher. Back then, obviously, probably almost 95, 100% of your coaches were teachers. So, which is not the case anymore.
No, not at all.
So, and then Ralph McDonough was he was social studies teacher. He was the head varsity coach, and Mike was the head JV coach. So, great guys.
Yeah. Do you remember who was the most influential coach you had in youth hockey on the West Side?
I would have to say, there was one of the first years I think I played, I had a coach, the name was Edmund Vandenbosch, and he rest in peace. He's gone now, but he was hard-nosed at the youth level. He was hard-nosed coach that definitely, we were probably a bunch of clowns, so we needed to be kept in line, but I mean, we were good kids, but he really did keep us in line and taught us about the hard work and being focused on what you're going to do. There was one quick story with him. One time, he didn't tend to like parents too much.
Okay. And
there was a time at a game, and there was a lot of I can't remember who the game was against, and it was a close game type game with a rival, and referee calls going one way or another way, and our parents, the West Side parents, yelling and screaming and all that. So finally he actually stopped the game, and he kind of signaled for all the parents to come into the lobby down at Kenyaco. And he says, I'm going to go outside and talk with you guys a little bit. So we went outside the door, got them all outside the door, went back in and put a chain around the door. And they couldn't come back in. So,
I don't think you could get away with that now.
No. You may as well look for another coaching job
if you lock the parents out of the building.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
And so I guess that was a good message sent.
Yeah. Nothing speaks louder than a chain around the door when your kid's inside, right?
So, but anyways, yeah, he was big, and then of course, the high school coaches were obviously very, very good with that stuff too.
Okay.
And learned a lot of discipline. My father, working in the in the packing plant, taught me a lot of discipline too. But I learned a lot of discipline the hard way, believe me. But that was big.
So you said that as a senior you didn't play much on the varsity
right.
team. So what made you want to stick with hockey? How did you avoid getting bitter about not getting the playing time? And what made you want to become a coach after that?
That's a great question that I've never really thought a lot about. I kept playing even after high school. I hooked up with a group of about 20 guys that various high schools, some from Highland, Creighton, just kind of all over the public school areas and things. And I got in and we played what we called Sunday night hockey. We played every Sunday, starting at Kenyackle, and then we ended up playing at Biff, and we ended up playing at Pleasant over the years. And we did that for about 18 years. So I kept a run with those guys for about 18 years, the same 20 guys every Sunday night. So I guess I still kept the fire going, and actually probably became a better hockey player after all those years. But just playing Sunday night pickup hockey is a whole different thing. But and then of course the firstborn, when my son was born, and then Matt, and then he got into it, and then that's where I started the coaching bug. So that was in 1989.
So it was Matt wanted to play, and you thought, well, I can coach my kids. So 89, you started on this incredible career that spanned.
Yep, until now,
40 years.
Yeah. So I have never missed a year. Knock on wood. God forbid. I haven't never had to miss a year, and a lot of kudos to that. Obviously, with my wife, because Lori, her name is, and going through that. It put burden on her when the kids were little.
Oh, 100%.
And, and my time away being at the rink and all that. I mean, granted back then, there really wasn't watching film and doing all these things, that you do nowadays. But I mean, still, it was time consuming, And, I'd have a lot of kids that maybe didn't have two parents at times in their lives, and so giving a lot of rides, doing things like that to help the kids get to the rink every day. So when they needed it, I should say. So, but yeah, it's been a crazy run, and it just once it got into me, it's never gotten out yet. I take it year by year now, but I think that I feel I got a few more years in me. I still can communicate well with the kids. I try to keep myself young that way, and I obviously all the things I've learned from the various coaches and people I've worked with, and then mixing in my styles, I'm keeping going as long as I can.
The coaches giving kids rides to practice. I did that too.
Yep.
I grew up a block from my friend Nate, and his stepdad Tom was our baseball coach. So whenever I needed a ride to practice, I would ride with Tom because we were going to the same place.
Sure.
But did you view that simply as I'm responsible for these kids, and if they need a ride, I'm going to give them a ride? It's not even a second thought.
Yeah, it was never a second thought. Plus, I wanted them to stay in an activity. So I didn't want, and again, I didn't have to do this every time, but there was definitely times that they'd tell me, like, I'm not going to be able to get to practice tomorrow or whatever, and I have a ride. I said, well, I'll pick you up. You'd be ready at blah, blah. So, like I said, I didn't want them to fall into something else, So I wanted them to keep active in an activity. So,
do you think that attitude still exists in youth hockey? And granted, I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who only works, alongside youth hockey. So,
right.
And a lot of the associations that we work with happen to be the ones that you might someone's always available to take the kid.
Yeah.
In the Yukon XL with the new heated seat. Someone's always available to take the kid.
Yeah.
Do you think you're losing that a little bit in youth hockey where the coach has got to pick somebody up because mom and dad just can't do it?
I think, in my opinion, I think times have changed a little bit, and people maybe are a little more nervous about not being in control of their children. Obviously, coaches get into it, and they go through background screening and all these things. And I don't want to get into a dark subject, but I'm just saying is that I believe that maybe, the parents want to make sure that part of it, they're going to be as hands-on as possible, getting their kids to and from the rink safely. I haven't coached youth hockey in a lot of years, but so I can't talk from experience, but I'm sure it happens. Yeah, I'm sure there's still that thing, Johnny and his buddy Joey and Mikey, we're all going, my dad's going to take us tonight, or they switch, do things like that. But, back then it was more of a necessity just to not have the kids running around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So safe sport would prevent a coach from picking up a child.
Is it really against the rules?
I just did my safe sport
oh my gosh.
recently.
But here's the good news. There's GroupMe and there's other ways for families and parents to connect outside of requesting from the coach. But I will say, consider what you did, paint it forward, because 8 years ago or 10 years ago before it was safe sport, it was so restrictive.
Yep.
Absolutely, coaches carried on that passion and it for youth and the ability for hockey to keep them out of trouble. So thank you for doing it then, because you do instill a tradition in the passion in a sport that it's a smaller sport, but people carry on what their coach taught them. So,
right.
So thank you, because I'm a coach in the youth, and that's the attitude that I have.
There you go. And I forgot about you're right with the safe sport too, and so there you go. There's some of the answers there. That was great input. But
and when you were coaching on the west side, when Matt got into it, obviously Matt came from a loving home with 2 parents and a lot of support, but you mentioned you coached there were some rough and tumble kids on those teams. What do you remember most from those early years? Was it a challenge to get everybody to quiet down in the locker room because they were so rambunctious, or they're pretty disciplined, learning, ready to learn, I should say?
I think I can put it this way. Is that kind of the way, I was taught through coaches and through my parents, a little more hard-nosed teaching at times. And so I had a bit of a rough exterior too. So I never had really any, troubles corralling the kids or getting them to do this or that. I knew sometimes things were said that, again, with safe sport and all the things that are going on today, I probably would have never had a run of 37 years. But and I'm not bragging about that. I'm just I knew what I had to do,
right?
And it had to be done in certain ways at certain times. But nowadays, I don't know, you really couldn't do some of that anymore. So all of the coaches in the area in that. During that period, really were, hammering down the disciplines and things like that. And I know, to this day, being in touch with a lot of former players, through social media and everything like that, I know a lot of them, I think after these amount of years have gone by, that I think they respected that. At the time, they might have not liked getting chewed out, but, it happened. And it taught them some things, too, that they carried on just like happened to me when I was that age. So,
and I think it's fantastic, because the only way you can be hard on the kids is if you truly have their best interests at heart. And if you're coaching kids from this, we already mentioned it twice, the small geographic area of the west side, you're going to see these kids at the grocery store. You're going to see these kids outside at Baker Playground. You have to know who they are in order to be hard on them.
Right. And, some of them too, they'd come by the house where we lived there, and we'd be out grilling or doing whatever, and so I'd walk by and say, "Yeah, come on in and have a hot dog," So there was a lot of, so they knew the balance between when I was being hard, and I always told them there's that fun time, and all of that side of it too. So they definitely were able to recognize both sides of the coin for that stuff. So, but like I said, nowadays it's a little tougher, to kind of manipulate some of them waters like that.
Yeah, and it's also tougher because the kids feel more spread out. I don't know how many kids hop on a bicycle anymore and pedal 2 blocks over to their friend's house. And when I was growing up, we had this little gang. I would ride my bike to my friend Mark's house. We'd pick up Mark. We'd dink around for an hour or two. We said, let's go pick up Joe. We'd ride our bikes over to Joe's house. Was there a little crew like that? Maybe for Matt or Vinny is your youngest, right?
Yes.
Were there a crew like that?
They would, when they would do their activities down at Palace Playground, baseball and things like that. They would literally hop on the bikes and jump down there, just kind of like I did when I was at their age at that time. So, yes, there was a little group of them that would do that, and it was, you never had to worry about them going off on the bikes. It was different times, put it that way. No, too, with talking about, the disciplines with the kids, the whole point of any of that was never to be an intimidation factor to the kids. It was just to really teach them to, when it's, like as I say, when it's time to work, it's time to work, and when it's time to have fun, we'll have fun. So really, I just kind of want to reiterate, I don't want to sound like some guy that was a loose, crazy guy with a whistle. So.
Oh yeah, the comments below this are going to be crazy.
They're going to be nuts. From all 88 viewers, they're going to be so mad.
Yeah.
A coach dished out a little discipline. I think there are some coaches that probably beat you in the verbal tongue lashing area.
Yeah, it's probably when I come across you at your time, it was a little more PG, but
I got my ass chewed.
Yeah.
You and Jay Huh, who I see quite a bit because his kids are still active.
Yep.
You guys called me into the room at Oscar Johnson at one point to call me out for hot dogging during JV practice because I was an asshole and I had varsity practice after, so I wasn't trying hard at JV. And you and Jay dressed me down and said you can lose your varsity spot as quick as you got it, so figure it out.
That's funny.
I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you and Jay can be pretty intimidating. Put you side by side and those smiles drop down and you guys raise your voices. You guys can be pretty intimidating.
What did you know? You never hot dog.
No, never, not at all. I don't have a job where I talk into a microphone and make it all about me. Not one bit.
Just let me know if he needs to be brought down a little bit. Yeah. I'll come in and take care of it. Yeah.
The discipline's working.
You can use another speech from Coach Aguirre. When you were a kid, you mentioned you didn't pay attention to the numbers or what have you, but as an adult in the room, almost had it feel the same principles still apply today at certain programs where you look years in advance. What are our numbers going to look like? Yep. How many are we going to have to contract a couple of teams here? Do we only go B? Do we eliminate a C team because we're too good for C, but we're not good enough to play B1, so we're going to play B2? As an adult, what was that like trying to judge the numbers with the West Side Association?
There was probably in the I'm going to say through the into the 90s. That's kind of when it started peaking a little bit. Okay. But we had a decent amount of numbers at that time, and we had set up the board structure that every association sets up, and there was lots of activity behind the scenes to look at our numbers, and there was times that we actually talked about maybe trying to bring other kids in from other areas, and that's where at one point when it started to dip a little bit, then that's when it came into the West Side West End, and we had to go we went across the river and merged with some of those kids.
Got to go across the bridge and pick somebody up.
That's right. And so that helped a tremendous amount there, and then from there, then it was just again, we were able to meet with our board and I got into those different level directors positions that I had when I was in the association and eventually as the hockey director, but so I was in charge of tryouts. So then then that's when we were rolling in the heyday, and then we had to determine levels of play. There was a period back then in the Twin City District when it was called MAHA. It was called the Minnesota Amateur Hockey Association. Mm-hmm. That's what it was at that time. But we were allowed to play like an A level within the district in our games, and we could go outside of the district and play like a B level.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Because we were so small. I mean, we weren't, the bigger associations. We weren't, massive numbers like they had.
Yeah.
Still we had 2 teams of 12 kids.
Yep.
But but we were competitive, but not to be competitive as an A team all the time.
Right.
So I don't remember how that worked out that way, but it did, and it was legal. We were doing it, but that helped a lot tremendously at times for that to get our kids at the proper levels. But and then the trick too is then again with that was the tough thing was all the teams was finding coaches. So
yeah, are you saying that with a little bit of nuance and a little bit of extra effort, we could find a solution for teams that are good in their district but not so good outside?
Yeah,
weird. I feel like we could do that a little bit more now. But.
Yeah, that was a real thing that happened back then, and but it really benefited our kids.
Yeah,
it was all about their development. So and it was a way to make that. It wasn't about winning. It was not that we were going out and bringing home this huge trophy case of trophies down to Kenyaco. We did win some things, but like I said, it helped push our kids harder outside of the district too.
Well, that would have been nice. My second year of Pee Wee's, I played for Como area, and we went undefeated in the district. And we weren't that good, but going outside the district, I think it would have helped us develop as play. And we weren't really thinking about developing as play. I don't think anybody from that team played beyond high school at all. Well, but that would have been helpful if we could have gone outside the district and played like a really good B2 team from White Bear Lake, as opposed to playing the same teams over and over and over again that we were routinely beating. So I also wanted to throw in a plug there that we went undefeated in
I know. I heard it. I heard it, yeah.
A couple of those kids ended up playing for you.
Yep, there you
go. Hey, Como area was the breeding ground for St. Bernard's. I think over the span of 2 seasons, I think St. Bernard's helped itself to like 90% of the Bantams and Pee Wees.
No doubt. Yeah, there was several, no doubt about it. But there was a lot of good players there, and that was always a good rivalry game for our West Side West End kids against Como and of course Johnson. And so. I want to play a little bit of a memory game here. Who was the best player you ever coached from the West Side? Oh boy. Well, I would have to say, coming through the West Side, if you're talking through that area, we had there was a couple very good players that came through. He was from the West End actually. His name was Luke Solscheider. Okay. He was a very good player. He actually attempted he was kind of with St. Thomas for a little bit. And then there was another player, Mike Osborne. His father, Tim, was the president of the association. And those 2 players were very, very good coming out of our environment. And, trying to think, those were those two come to my mind during my 10, 11 years with the West Side West End program. They were 2 of the top end kids for sure. But then there was a lot of other good players too, but those 2 were fairly exceptional. Everybody knew about them at that time.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially for smaller associations, not to put too much pressure on youth players, but to have sort of those flag bearer type players where people know who they are and people might want to check out the West Side team, and they act as these incidental advertisements for the program. So it's a big deal for a program like Westside to have a Mike Osborne or Luke Salscheider play HP, go Final 54, all that stuff. That would be big for you guys.
Yeah, and they back then they didn't call it the HP. It was just called Selects when that started, and they were players that were involved in that. And but also the younger kids in the association, the Mites and all of the younger players, they really looked up to those 2 players and a lot of the other older players, but they could see their, their higher end talent levels. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting Kyle Fulmer's autograph.
Oh yeah.
When he was in high school, and I remember thinking that was the biggest deal. Kyle Fulmer signed this crappy little napkin that I got at Biff Adams Arena. So I definitely remember those kids that got their names in the paper and who were really really talented. They meant a lot to smaller programs.
They sure did. And their character level was extremely high. These two, yeah.
You don't get very far on the West Side without having high character, do you, Coach?
Yeah.
At what point did it feel like the West Side Association's numbers were getting to a point where the association couldn't continue?
Well, that was
to crap on the parade that we're throwing.
Yeah, that came in the very late 90s and early 2000.
Okay.
And we started really having a lot of troubles. And, there was decisions were made to, in order to help try to keep kids on the ice, we only charged $200. The board
for registration fees.
And the whole year. And that included, that also included helmets, gloves, and breezers.
Wow.
But with that took a lot of, your fundraising, and back then pull tabs were a big thing. Well, I guess they still are nowadays, but we had a pull tab booth that did very well, and all of that was funneled back into the program to keep that cost low. So we, decisions by the board were to try to make that as feasible as possible for families to play, and keeping it around the 200 to 250 maybe at the peak, which is extremely, even going way back then. I mean, that still was, it was a challenge for some families, but as you know what the cost of it is today, it's not that, but and we also had some scholarship possibilities for the kids that we would, they couldn't foot the whole bill. We would, try to help out with that too. So, but then, again, like I say, the numbers started sliding, and I think maybe some demographics of other players, their families come up and they might have started moving off. The hockey people, that is. Yeah. And, it became cheaper to, get a pair of high tops and possibly a singlet and go wrestle, things like that, which there's nothing wrong with that. But that started a bit of a demise. And then we ended up merging with Harding.
Okay.
The Harding area. Harding area was struggling extremely bad at that time too. And I remember I coached a Bantam team, was the Harding West Side Bantam team. And so we merged and put together an A Bantam team. And, that experience went for a couple of years. And then eventually, I think even at that point, West End was the little bigger contributor to that effort than the Harding, and then things started going away at Harding too. So, but that worked out well. And then, like I say, it was probably early 2000 somewheres, because I started my high school coaching probably around 2003, roughly.
Okay.
Something like that. So that's about when it happened, and we tried to make efforts to do anything we could. We couldn't lower it anymore, and numbers went down, and bam, it was gone.
Yeah, it's just this kind of watching like a stock arrow, just down, 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 and the cost of everything, not even just equipment, but like the cost of Freon. The cost of Zamboni maintenance is going up, up.
Yep.
And eventually, you can't make it work anymore.
Yeah.
So what day? Do you remember what day officially Westside closed its doors?
Oh gosh, no.
Metaphorically, because Kenyakle's still open.
Yeah. Well, it again, like you say, it was early 2000s, because I had kind of started going towards the high school level, and I got away from it for a little bit there, towards the very end, so I can't remember exactly, but it definitely was early, maybe 2001, 2002, somewheres in there,
Okay.
And then, it was sad, And then, of course, the Wild started doing their things of trying to help. They were trying to help too a little bit and things like that, but it just, when you don't have the bodies, and then other communities that you're trying to get to come to join the party, they're going down in numbers there's only something. There's nothing you can do at that point.
Yeah. Did Westside ever go to a state tournament when you were coaching?
No, we came close. We had a Pee Wee team that beat Como that year. Wasn't your perfect season.
No, not at all.
But I think that team came close in the regional play, and but I think Como ended up taking them in the end. But there was some great games. There was some good players, really good players on both sides of the ice there.
I think Como area went to state once.
I think there might have been a time
like
throughout
05,
that.
Maybe?
Yeah, I think there might have been a time somewheres in that time frame when they did make it.
Right before everybody left for Hill Murray.
Yeah. Right.
Everybody stuck around to play 1 year of Bantams.
Yeah.
And that banner, I remember looking at it in Biff Adams, that lonely one banner. Proud of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely proud of it.
No doubt.
One little banner hanging in
doubt.
the corner.
They earned it.
They did before everybody took off. You migrated into the high school ranks, and we're going to give you your flowers here in a second. You were the assistant coach of the year, the state assistant coach of the year.
That was for that was for the. It was actually for the section.
Okay.
Within the sections, they give out assistant coaches of the year. So I got it through the St. Paul Saints, my first one. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and in you're voted on that through your peers within the section. So
that would be pretty gratifying.
It was
to have
a
your
section
peers vote for you.
It was very special. No doubt. And then I was fortunate enough a few years later then at Mounds View, and so in AA for Section 4 AA. And actually that year, my head coach, a good friend of mine that I met, ironically, we coached together with the Harding West Side team. That's how we met.
Is that Rick?
Yeah, Rick Thomas.
Yeah.
Yes, my good friend. And so then later on, we hooked up and we coached Mounds View High School for 4 years. He was the head coach, I was assistant, and then we had a great year that year. I think we lost Hill Murray in the semifinals, like 5-2 in the section semi. Anyways, he was voted as the head coach of the year in Section 4 AA, and I was the assistant. So that was we took both of them that year. So that was very special too.
Oh, congratulations! I don't know anyone else who's been the assistant coach of the year twice for 2 different programs.
Yeah, I don't know either. I guess it's
You're
something
one of
that
Ed.
I don't know about that, but there's a lot of coachings are pretty humble about that stuff, and it may get out at a time. It's going to be announced, and it's done over with. This is 2007, 2015, so it's many years ago now. The only reason I do have them hanging up on a wall, so I see them occasionally, and very proud of them.
And then you linked up with Pat Griswold, and I think you coached at Minnehaha for a couple of years.
Yeah, I did. I had a 5-year run at Minnehaha Academy. Yes, as working with the varsity assistant there. Yes.
Okay, and now you're with Pat.
Yes.
Holy Angels.
Yep.
So I want to talk about Pat for a second. What makes him worth following as a head coach?
Well, we go back 20 years.
Yeah, he said 27 to South St. Paul.
Oh, yeah, I guess I can't remember. I'm older, so maybe it's kind of not right.
Pat strikes me as the guy who remembers dates and times from long, long ago.
Yeah, it went way back to there was a year that I did coach at South St. Paul, a Pee Wee team. And ironically, when you asked the question about who was the best players in the West End teams that I was coaching, our goalie that year for that Pee Wee team was Alex Daylock.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There we go. There's a name.
So he was obviously very good. His brother Nick was on the team also, but
no slouch either.
No. He played. I think he was Auguste. I think he played at Gustavus
He played at college. I remember watching him in high school. He was a good player.
Very good. So that's way back when then Pat and I met, and actually even when I had the West Side Harding Bantam team, I played against Pat down at Wakota. He had a Bantam team at Silver South St. Paul.
Okay.
And that team we managed. We had a player by the name of Brian Aragoni. He was out of Hill Murray, and then he ended up. I think his college was at Hamlin at the end, but very good player. And Brian pulled us through there, and that all that happened before. Back then, the players we would start a little earlier at the youth level, and then November would come around in high school tryouts, and then that's always when we would lose players.
Yeah. So you're biting your nails thinking, okay, who's going to make the jump this year?
So then we lost Brian, and he went to Hail Mary, and the rest is history. But anyways, that's kind of where Pat and I started meeting each other, getting into golfing, and then being coaches, acquaintances, and things like that. So yeah, it's gone on a long time.
Did he talk you into taking the high school job with him over a round of golf?
No, he just, it was ironically the way that happened is he mentioned Minnehaha. Well, we were in our STP at Minnehaha that year. This would be my 4th year, so it was 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And our numbers were down at Minnehaha. It was falling. And they made a decision to have us go through our STP, which was fine, but then at the end of STP, they said the decision was made to close it. Okay. So now you're in August basically, and without a job. And there was a panic situation at that point because I definitely wasn't ready to hang it up. And it's such a tight knit community that it's a lot of who and your acquaintances and obviously your what kind of person you are, and all these things come into play. It's difficult to find coaching jobs at the high school level. Mm-hmm. So then Pat did contact me, and I thought about it, and we talked, and so it was basically a phone call and some wings at BW's. Because that was his favorite stomping ground. Yeah.
Speaking of people on Facebook, I can always count on Pat Griswold to give me a review of Buffalo Wild Wings.
That's right.
I can always count on Pat.
So we actually went there, and then that's where we kind of sealed the deal. But I was very grateful that he reached out and he offered me the head junior varsity job there at Holy Angel. So. And I get to get into some varsity assisting too, but the thing is he lets me run with the JV, and it's great. It's been a great thing to work with him. So the reason why I followed him is just because of knowing him all those years, knowing he's a good stand-up guy, and he does it the right way, and that's the way I do it. So it's worked out real well.
Yeah, well, I checked in with him before this interview. He had some very nice things to say about you. He said, Eddie is so dedicated, he works so hard, and more importantly, he cares so much about the boys. He likes to win just like everyone, but he really is about development at the end of the day.
Yeah.
As a JV coach, I think junior varsity is the most underappreciated asset in Minnesota high school hockey. I've told so many people about how much I loved the Matamidi champion in 2020, 2022 maybe.
Sure.
And I think every player but one on that roster had played JV for Matamidi at some point. What to you makes JV hockey so important in terms of development and getting used to the high school schedule? And you're in charge of the JV program at Holy Angel, so you play a pivotal role in that program.
It is very pivotal because obviously you want to build as much as you can through that junior varsity program, but and I hadn't. It was different getting back into that. That's kind of how I started with the St. Paul Saints, was as a JV head coach and a varsity assistant. But I was doing all of that at the same time. But so it's been a while. But so I got back into it again, and I'm all about the development piece. And some of the great things and challenges is just keeping making sure that you have to be keeping them in line. And making sure that, they're focused every day. Don't let them slide an inch. They've got to, as we say it at Richfield, we practice on rink 2, the varsity practices on rink 1. I tell them, I want you guys to get out of here. I want you to get over to rink 1 someday, So I said, it's not that I don't love you, but I said, this is your chance to now try to get over there and be with the varsity group. But and some of the other challenges is when your swing players come down, swing players being those that are maybe the 4th line on the varsity, and then they come down and play some JV periods, and keeping them motivated and keeping them, so you got to kind of nudge them sometimes, not all of them, but some of them kind of maybe take it as a punishment. I don't know a better word to say than that. And, they need to understand that it's again, more about a development piece and getting down and getting more game time. Because if you're on the varsity bench as a fourth liner, you're probably not seeing a lot of ice time there unless it's a game that's out of control one way or the other, and hopefully in favor of us. But so there's a lot of little twists and turns that go on there. But the other thing is that, again, I kind of go back to some of my old roots of making sure, again, there's a time for business and then there's a time for fun. And, even in an opening warm-up shooting drills, if I see poor passing, poor focus, guys aren't ready in lines, whistle gets blown, and then they're going to hear something about it, but I ain't going to let it go too long. Because and eventually, as you get a new group in every year of the freshmen, sophomores that come in, and they kind of start figuring it out, after maybe a quarter of the way through the season, and they start realizing that, what they need to do to buckle down, but you got to stay on top of them, and that's the fun of it. So then I want to see them, excel, all of them. I don't care who they are. I want to see them all excel and try to make their dream of playing varsity hockey someday for Holy Angels. So
now, Holy Angels, I don't know how many people would consider Holy Angels to be an underdog. In Section 1AA, you'd be the favorite. In Section 6, you guys are perpetually an underdog. Does that fit you? It feels like you've coached underdog programs forever.
Yeah, it basically, that's kind of that's, you hit it on the head. I mean, and I'm not, I think that's built a lot of character within me and the way I approach it. But no, it definitely doesn't hinder me at all with what I'm doing. I mean, I'm kind of used to that dogfight. And again, it's just all about constantly during games letting them know when, geez, we just missed, our last 8 breakout passes out of the zone. We can't hang on to pucks on our backhand to save our lives. Mm-hmm. But anyways, just kind of keep nitpicking them. Sometimes they give you the crooked eye and well, geez, coach, we're not going to catch them all. Well, no, we need to get better at it if you want to do that. And our schedule has beefed up. This year, the schedule is going to be even tougher. So, and I'm excited for that because it's a challenge. Yeah, we're definitely going to be in a challenge. The other thing with the JV life is sometimes you don't have that consistency of having that swing line players in your JV practices every day.
Right.
So, we'll get them sometimes before, and I'm not complaining about it, it's just the nature of it. So that group needs to play at that pace to keep pushing themselves at the varsity pace. So that gets to be a little challenging because you don't get to work a lot on special teams when you're, coming into a game. But we do try to work it where the day before a game, we'll get 15, 20 minutes where we get them down and then we go through some of that there too. So, and then of course it's like any other team. It's everybody wants a piece of that power play and that penalty kill, and those are obviously always the challenges, no matter what team you're coaching. But it's been really good. First year I only had 10 skaters. My first year with the JV. And now the last 2 years, the numbers are growing because the program is growing, and it's becoming a lot more noticeable.
Yeah,
so,
and I mean this completely as a compliment. There's no better advertisement or salesman for the program than Grizz. Grizz is Holy Angels all the time.
Oh, yeah.
If somebody wants to talk to him about his stars, he will go on about his kids and his programs.
Oh, yeah. No.
And you're the beneficiary of that. It must be nice having a full bench for a JV game.
Yeah, no, it is. It's especially last year was, more so where we literally had 4 lines on the JV. So, and that's great, because it also is a motivator for kids. If some kids aren't going to, if they're disappointed where they're at, their stature on that team, well, you got to get out there, you got to show us. So then, okay, you're not good, all right, we'll get somebody else in there. So you're almost kind of running it like a varsity in a way, but it's nice to have, we need to have that full competition factor within the JV unit. So, and last year we had it. So,
All right, you've been more than generous with your time today, but I got 2 more questions for you. We're going to start with the fun one and end with the really hard, complicated one. So my fun one for you, if I approached you and job availability was no, you mentioned that sometimes you're just happy to get a call and someone wants you to coach. If that was not a part of this and I approached you with a quarter zip for Holy Angels or for Edina, who are you going with?
Well, I mean, right now, quite honestly, my dedication would be to the Holy Angels right now, and I believe in what's going on there. I'd have nothing. I don't know anything about the mechanics of Edina other than obviously everybody knows they win, and they knocked us out last year.
Yeah.
But I've loved the whole community of the Holy Angels thing, and I believe in Grizz that much of what he does, and as you mentioned, all of the legwork that he puts into it and effort. It's a lot.
Yeah, I think a better way to phrase that question would have been: would you rather coach a perennial power, or would you rather coach a team that is just fighting to get to 500?
I would still be where I'm at, with that. I think
rather coach the underdog.
Yeah, I think the other team, obviously it's great and fun and all that, I would imagine, but but I like the pleasure of bringing these players and trying to mold them and get them to where they want to go, and it's a lot more. It's challenging.
All right, here's the big challenging question. How do we bring back hockey on the west side, Ed?
Well, it's one of my notes that I had here was that, and I couldn't make this event, but the West Side Boosters, which is the big entity on the west side, has been for a long time.
Boosters. I follow them on Facebook.
Yep.
They're awesome.
They are. They're very awesome and very competitive. Football, baseball,
basketball.
They
almost swept the city basketball championships for rec league.
So they did an event it was November 10th. As a matter of fact, I remember the date because that's my anniversary date, marriage. But they did an event. They put together an event with Edgecombe and was a couple of the other rec centers and the Dynamites. Sure, you've heard of them, So they I don't know if they put it totally together, but they did a fun skate down at Kenyako. It was a Sunday afternoon from 1 to 3. And I couldn't get there. I was out of town, but I don't know what came of that, but it was an event to try to bring that interest back. So I never was able to find out how that went.
Okay.
So that's one thing. But, on the other hand, again, now today, the way, knowing the community, what I know about it from my experiences, and when hockey sticks are, running up to $400 a piece and skates up to $1,200, all top of the line things. I still don't think that the money side of it is there.
Yeah.
And, and obviously now with the unfortunate thing of, the Johnson program, high school program is now gone. So that's a very tough question, and I don't know that it's ever going to happen. Going back to when I mentioned to you when we were trying to, keeping the fees low, that was way back early 2000s, and look where we're at now, and it's never come back. So I just don't really think it'll happen. I believe Edgecombe and some of these rec centers still go.
Yep, Langford's got a couple of teams. Edgecombe actually does a decent job filling out their numbers. I think they have 2 or 3 teams in squirts and in peewees,
which is awesome.
Yeah,
and so I don't think it'll ever come back.
Okay,
unfortunately,
it might never come back. But you need one West End fan here, one West Side fan right here. I love the West Side. Part of the reason I wanted you to come in is because I think the West Side is underappreciated, undervalued, and I wanted to shine a little bit of light on the West Side because I do think there are some phenomenal athletes over there. If you go to Baker Playground and you watch a basketball or you watch a pickup soccer game, you are amazed at how fast some of those kids are.
Right.
And I feel the same way about Sylvan West and about North.
There's others.
And I think that rec hockey making a bit of a comeback, whatever that looks like, because it's never going to look the way it did in the 1950s. Things are too different. But I think that eliminating the intimidating barrier to entry for younger families, I think would be critical in reviving city hockey in St. Paul. So once we hang up the microphones, you and I will sketch out a plan how to take over the city. Ed, how's that
There
sound?
you go. We can do it.
Ed, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Thank you for not chewing me out too badly in high school. And I think I speak for everyone in the state when we thank you for what you do. You run a JV program over at Holy Angels. You've been an assistant coach of the year. And you're a super proud West Sider. And I love that for you. You're one of one, Ed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Peter.